While exploring the vastness of space, some chose to divide the Milky Way galaxy into the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. Though most of this space remained uncharted by the individual species of the Alpha and Beta quadrants, two great events in the 24th century expanded their knowledge considerably. The first came from the opening of the Bajoran wormhole in 2369, allowing them to travel 70,000 light-years away into a region of the Gamma Quadrant, bordering the Dominion, a vast empire ruled by a species of shapeshifters called the Founders. The second event resulted from the disappearance of the starship Voyager, which was transported to the Delta Quadrant by a powerful alien, allowing them to explore and meet local powers as they made the long journey back to Earth. Yet the most reliable and abundant information available related to the Alpha and Beta quadrants, where various species raced against each other, striving to learn more about their space, often so they might exploit the information to use against their enemies. Though some of these competing civilizations were located primarily in the Beta quadrant, by the 24th century they were commonly referred to as Alpha Quadrant powers. Though information concerning their early history was limited, many believe the progenitor species of humanoids existed roughly 4.5 billion years in the past, traveling throughout the galaxy, seeding worlds with their genetic material, resulting in the eventual evolution of humans, Romulans, Cardassians, Klingons, and thousands of others. Some even link these early progenitors to a species later called the Preservers, as they also brought life to various worlds by taking populations near extinction, including some from Earth, and transporting them to a new home where they might thrive. However, these groups were separated by so much time, many believe they were not related. Among the other ancient species living billions of years in the past, there were those who built the Guardian of Forever, a gateway with a sentient mind, allowing others to travel through time and space. There were also a species of slavers who ruled over a galactic empire until a rebellion wiped out most of the intelligent civilizations of the age. The Darcey species existed 87 million years ago, leaving behind many artifacts and stories from their mythology, while the Lactrans were slug-like telepaths who developed a technologically advanced civilization, and the Organians evolved into beings of pure energy. As humanoid species continued to evolve throughout the galaxy, the Klingon Empire rose over 600,000 years before the Federation, a highly advanced people able to move entire planetary and solar systems. Their civilization thrived for many years, but eventually collapsed during the Age of Makto when their home system was destroyed by a supernova. Around this same time, another species from the planet Arit began to make great advancements, not only technologically as they colonized and seeded other worlds, but also physically and mentally, coming to see themselves as gods. Yet this attitude ultimately led them into a terrible civil war that destroyed the planet and wiped out the population, leaving only a few who survived by transferring their consciousness into special receptacles. Later, a technologically advanced species known as the Iconians developed gateways which allowed them to travel to other worlds, earning a reputation as aggressive conquerors. Referred to as demons of air and darkness, enemies destroyed their home planet of Iconia by orbital bombardment roughly 200,000 years before the rise of the Federation. While many emerging powers expanded through violent conquest, the United Federation of Planets had its origins in a defensive alliance between humans, Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites, as they resisted Romulan aggression throughout the 2150s. This relationship led to talks about forming a coalition of planets, which then became the United Federation of Planets in 2161. Though most of the great powers that emerged in this region of space were led by a single species that accrued power by destroying or subjugating their neighbors, member worlds of the Federation joined voluntarily and remained semi-autonomous while also electing representatives to speak for them in the central government. Encouraging the idea of multiculturalism, all member worlds were nevertheless required to operate within the confines of the Federation Charter, their constitution based on the enlightened principles of equality, liberty, and peaceful coexistence. The protection and freedom offered by the Federation appealed to many, and by the 24th century there were over 150 member worlds. Unfortunately, not all species shared their values or trusted their intentions, sometimes leading to misunderstandings, conflict, and war. Representing the military and scientific branch of the Federation, Starfleet was charged with technological research and development, leading them to become one of the most advanced powers in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. Though Starfleet intelligence was primarily responsible for providing the government with information about their neighbors and enemies, the need to work within the confines of the law led to the formation of Section 31, a rogue agency working without government oversight, allowing them to use whatever means necessary to accomplish their objectives. Founded in the 9th century by the legendary hero Kahless the Unforgettable, the Klingon Empire was a feudal monarchy led by an emperor and high council. A species of aggressive warriors, Klingons avoided civil strife by sending their people to conquer alien worlds, thereby expanding the empire and bringing glory to their families. Yet their need for battle also meant that when peace came to the empire, houses would inevitably turn against each other, plotting, scheming, and warring for power. Though the Empire once traded a fleet of battlecruisers to the Romulan Star Empire in exchange for their cloaking technology, hostilities eventually led the Klingons to consider them a blood enemy. Similarly, in the 23rd century, the Empire came into conflict with the Federation until at last making peace in the Khitomer Accords of 2293, forming an alliance that made them the greatest superpowers in the region, resulting in decades of relative peace. A proud and courageous people, they were among the first to stand up against the Dominion invasion of the Alpha Quadrant in the late 24th century, and at one point held back the entire enemy fleet by themselves, losing so many soldiers, ships, and resources that when the war was won, they retreated within their borders and spent years rebuilding. The Romulan Star Empire was founded in the 5th century by Vulcan dissidents who abandoned their homeworld to conquer the planets of Romulus and Remus, where they developed into paranoid xenophobes, convinced of the superiority of their species. Governed by a praetor, proconsul, vice-proconsul, and senate, the Tal Shiar served as their intelligence agency, becoming a powerful political force in their society. Upon discovering humanity, hostility and war soon erupted. However, the people of Earth fought alongside several allies, resulting in the defeat of the Star Empire in 2160 and the establishment of the Neutral Zone border. Following this defeat, the Romulans retreated into their territory for a century before resurfacing in 2266 to engage the Federation in small skirmishes along the border, thereby establishing a state of Cold War. With the outbreak of the Dominion War in the 24th century, the assassination of a Romulan senator, seemingly murdered by Dominion agents, led them to join the Federation Alliance, contributing greatly to the defense of the Alpha Quadrant. The Cardassian Union was founded in the 19th century, with the establishment of the Detapa Council, who oversaw Central Command, the military faction, and the Obsidian Order, their intelligence agency. But in truth, the members of the Detapa Council were pawns for the other branches of government. Though they were once a peaceful people with a rich spiritual culture, famed for their art and architecture, by the 19th century they faced widespread famine and disease, leading to a revolution that replaced the government and reformed their society. In order to save their people, the new leaders of the Cardassian Union focused their efforts on military advancement and colonial expansion projects, conquering alien worlds and enslaving the native population in order to extract their mineral and agricultural wealth. This proved a brutal but largely successful strategy until the conquest of Bajor in the 24th century, a planet whose population refused to surrender, forming resistance movements and terrorist cells, which launched attacks for over 40 years, until the eventual retreat of the Cardassians and liberation of Bajor in 2369. Sharing a border with the ever-growing United Federation of Planets, the Cardassian military believed war was inevitable, and in 2347 launched a sneak attack on Setlik III in the mistaken belief that their neighbors were gathering forces in the region. War then erupted, lasting for 20 years, until at last ending in a stalemate, with the Armistice of 2367 and a formal treaty in 2370, creating a demilitarized border. As a result of this agreement, several former Federation worlds were now under the harsh rule of the Cardassian Union, leading some to rebellion and terrorism as they fought for independence. Using the harsh environment of the Badlands as cover for their ships, the Maquis demanded their territories be freed, and while the Federation was officially on the side of the Cardassians, many sympathized with the rebels and abandoned Starfleet to join their struggle. Several years later, as war loomed between the Alpha Quadrant powers and the Dominion species of the Gamma Quadrant, a preemptive strike was launched by the Obsidian Order of the Cardassian Union and the Tal Shiar of the Romulan Star Empire. Yet what they didn't realize was that the Dominion wanted them to attack the Founder homeworld in order to trap their fleet, resulting in a crushing victory for the Gamma Quadrant forces. This devastating loss caused the fall of the Obsidian Order, allowing for Military Central Command to take power within the Union. Eventually, a dissident movement grew, overthrowing military leadership and re-established a civilian government. Gul Dukat, who betrayed the military to receive a favorable position in the new government, then turned his back on them as well by making a backdoor deal to ally with the Dominion invasion force in exchange for being made ruler of the Cardassian Union. Despite the efforts of Gul Dukat, the Dominion Cardassian Alliance was eventually defeated, and having been on the front lines, they endured most of the collateral destruction, leaving them a shell of their former selves, forced to rebuild from the ashes of their fallen civilization. In addition to the many large and influential civilizations which thrived across the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, there were also many lesser powers, sometimes referred to as commercial and isolationist societies, such as the Ferengi Alliance of Ferenginar, a mercantile culture who purchased warp technology and used it to establish trade routes throughout the quadrant and beyond. Governed by a Grand Nagus, the Bill of Opportunities acted as their constitution, while the rules of acquisition were their legal and moral code, with even their religion focused around profit, as it stated Ferengi must use the wealth they earned in life to bribe the blessed exchequer after death, in order to gain entry into the divine treasury. Should they prove too poor, they would be cast into the vault of eternal destitution. Unwilling to risk alienating potential customers, the Ferengi remained neutral in most conflicts, preferring to settle disputes through negotiation and economic pressure rather than warfare. Although many other species saw the Ferengi as greedy, dishonest, craven, and manipulative, they often saw themselves as morally superior because their desire for non-violent, financially beneficial solutions meant they had no history of genocide, military conquest, or participation in large-scale wars. They also claimed to have never practiced slavery, though this was false, as females in their society were forbidden from pursuing profit, participating in government, or wearing clothes in public, and were expected to devote themselves entirely to birthing children and serving the men in their lives, though their economic and legal system meant only the most ruthless and greedy prospered, while the rest of their population lived in poverty. By the end of the 24th century, Grand Nagus Zek and his successor Rom began to reform their society, giving females equal rights and imposing taxes to pay for social programs. One of the most mysterious species of the Alpha Quadrant, the Breen of the Breen Confederacy, were isolationist and fiercely territorial, always appearing in environmental suits, which suggested the atmosphere of their homeworld was vastly different to that of other humanoids. Yet later sources revealed their planet was perfectly hospitable, meaning they wore their suits for other reasons. Known as Great Warriors, the Klingon Empire once sent a fleet of their best ships into Breen space, where they disappeared and were never heard from again. Their violent and unpredictable nature led the Romulans to develop a popular expression, "Never turn your back on a Breen." During the Dominion War of the late 24th century, the Breen joined the Dominion Cardassian Alliance, and in doing so, helped shift the tide of battle in favor of the invasion force. But in the end, they were defeated by the Federation Alliance, and forced to retreat back into their space. The Tholians of the Tholian Assembly were a powerful, isolationist, non-humanoid species hostile to those who violated their borders. Though they largely kept to themselves, they engaged in minor battles with the Federation and Klingons throughout the 24th century, though it did not escalate into a full-scale conflict. During the Dominion War, they chose to stay out of the fighting and signed a non-aggression treaty with the Gamma Quadrant forces. Another non-humanoid power were the Sheliak of the Sheliak Corporate, isolationist xenophobes who considered other species as lower life forms. In 2255, they signed a peace treaty with the Federation and broke off contact for over a century until they discovered a group of human settlers on one of their planets. Since this violated the treaty, Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise was sent to organize their evacuation. The Talarians were another xenophobic people who wore gloves when interacting with other species and engaged in minor skirmishes with the Federation throughout the 24th century, though full-scale war was avoided. A highly competitive population, they developed a strictly patriarchal society where women were not allowed to outrank men. The Bajorans of Bajor were one of the oldest civilizations in the Alpha Quadrant, with their history dating back 500,000 years. A deeply spiritual people, they worshipped a group of non-corporeal aliens called the Prophets, who lived in a nearby wormhole and seemed to have a relationship with the people of this planet, despite having little direct contact. Though they had interstellar spaceships by the 16th century, Bajorans did not place much emphasis on technological development, and so were unable to adequately defend themselves when the Cardassian Union invaded in 2319. By 2328, their planet was annexed and people enslaved, but the Bajorans resisted, forming terrorist cells to fight against their oppressors. Though the struggle took decades, they were eventually victorious, liberating Bajor in 2369, after which they applied for membership in the Federation. Yet when the Bajoran wormhole was discovered, and war broke out in the Alpha Quadrant, they found themselves at the mercy of the invaders, and so temporarily distanced themselves from the Federation to sign a non-aggression treaty with the Dominion. Reptilian humanoids ruled by the Gorn hegemony. The Gorn were an independent power who engaged the Federation in a brief military conflict over the possession of a colony. As captain of the Enterprise, James T. Kirk gained fame for defeating a Gorn warrior in combat, though he showed mercy and did not kill the creature. Despite their reputation as physically large and imposing warriors, their species was also known for brewing Meridor, a blue alcoholic drink well known throughout the quadrant. Deep within the Delphic expanse was the planet of Xindis, home to 6 species which evolved alongside each other, fighting terrible wars which eventually destroyed their homeworld and exterminated the avian population. This devastation led the remaining reptilians, insectoids, primates, aquatics, and arboreals to make peace and form an alliance while they settled their people on other worlds. During this time of hardship, they were visited by a group of trans-dimensional aliens called the Guardians, who helped them survive and in return were revered as religious figures. Yet these beings had an ulterior motive, and falsely informed the Xindi they were under threat from humanity, convincing them to launch an attack on Earth in 2153. However, Captain Jonathan Archer and the crew of the Enterprise managed to expose the deception and forge a lasting peace. Led by an autarch, the Tzenkethi species fought a war with the Federation in the 24th century, and nearly went to war again in 2371, when a changeling infiltrator nearly convinced a Starfleet ship to attack their homeworld without provocation, as part of the Dominion's continued campaign to weaken the Alpha Quadrant before invasion. Originating in the Orion system, the Orion Syndicate were a criminal organization who engaged in black market slave trading, gambling, racketeering, extortion, and smuggling. By the 24th century, they had influence across the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, working and trading with anyone willing to pay. And so when the Dominion War erupted, the Dominion Cardassian Alliance worked with the Syndicate, using their connections to organize spy and stealth operations within the Federation Alliance. Once an advanced spacefaring civilization, the species later known as the Baku were on the verge of self-annihilation until a group of them settled on a quiet planet in 2066 and abandoned their dependence on technology in order to live lives of simplicity and peace. However, not all were content with this new lifestyle, and so a faction tried to rebel and take over the planet, only to fail and be exiled into space, where they became the Son'a, aggressive nomads who colonized other worlds and practiced slavery, subjugating the Allura and Tarlik species. After years of conflict with the Federation resulting in numerous economic sanctions, the Son'a eventually stopped trading in slaves, but remained their enemies, allying with the Gamma Quadrant forces during the Dominion War. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Arhael the Silent Blade, Magic the Shaman, Belligerent Man, and Q Straight Arrow Valverde. If you'd like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to see more.